I'm going to show a quick demo of how good the GraphQL experience can be given the kind of tooling that we're able to build these days. And that applies to both new GraphQL users and experienced users alike. And to do that, I'm going to build a full application that is going to interact with the GitHub GraphQL API in an authenticated and live fashion. And I'm probably going to do that 4 or 5, maybe even 6 times in the next couple of minutes. So to get started, I want to go ahead and pull out a list of open issues from GitHub repository. And to do that, I'm going to use the Explorer over here. And the Explorer gives us a visual way of exploring what's available in a GraphQL API. So I'm going to name my query GitHub Open Issues, and I can just kind of see all the fields that are available. And I'm going to go ahead and go into GitHub, and I want to pull out a repository. And you can see here that the parameters are filled in for me, but I want to go ahead and make these variables. And you can see here how I can just kind of toggle whether this is a variable or is inlined at a 2-stitch site. So go ahead and make those variables. And now that I have our repository, let's go ahead and pull out a list of issues. I'm going to make the first number that we pull out a variable as well as the states that we want, so whether it's open or closed. And this is really nice because you can see how this toggling here gives us a way of actually sidestepping some kind of complex syntax issues that can oftentimes be a burden for both newcomers and experienced people. And we do that just by giving you a visual way of indicating what you want. So we have our issues. Let's go ahead and go into our individual issues. And for each of them, let's pull out the ID. Let's pull out their number. We'll pull out their state and their title and their URL. And this is already great. I can go ahead and pull out some data already. So you can see here I'm getting a list of these issues. And this is really nice, but I probably want to get this into a useful context. And that's probably going to be an app of some sort. And to do that, I'm going to use our code exporter. You can see here that we support lots of languages and different frameworks. In this case, I'll just use the React Apollo one. Now, each of these snippets that we generate kind of embed the best practices for GraphQL in that language or framework. So you can see here that GitHub Open Issue, the operation has become a standalone React component. And it's just using the bog standard use state hooks, has a small form. It's very self-contained. So let's go ahead and pull this in. And once this loads up, you can see here that it tried to run that query, but it noticed that we weren't logged in. And so that's kind of already baked in. So let's go ahead and first say I want to pull out a list of the first open issue on my blog. So I'm going to log into GitHub. That's already built in. And there we go. So we're able to pull out an open issue. And let's go ahead and pull out a closed issue. You can see that this one is closed. And this works exactly how you'd expect it. It's a fully self-contained React Apollo component with all of the best practices embedded, including authentication, error handling, state, forms, all the stuff you kind of think, and yet it is very, very small. Now, for the second to last step, I'm going to go ahead and add 2 more operations. One is a mutation, which is going to add our comment. And this is the same idea. We're just seeing a list of all the actions that are available. So inside of GitHub, I see all the actions I can take, including add comment. I'm going to make subject and body variables. Having created a comment, I'm going to go ahead and get a couple of fields back, including the body, the ID, and the URL. And let's go ahead and get the author, the avatar URL, and their login. And now this is kind of a complex selection that I don't really want to have to build more than once. So I'm going to go ahead and reuse this later. So I'll make that a fragment. You can see here that we just extracted that to its own fragment and then inlined it directly. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and make all of these arguments required so that we don't provide any default values. And now for the last step, let's go ahead and make a live comment. And this is just going to go into GitHub. And anytime there's an issue comment event on a given repo name and owner, we're going to go ahead and pull out the comment, and we're going to reuse that same fragment. So we'll get all that information back. And so you can see how we can really just explore and build up our application just visually inside of the schema, seeing what available mutations and actions and events that we have available to us. So now let's go ahead and open this up in a full code sandbox. So I'm just going to open this up in a new window here. And you can see how, once again, it has all of the auth built in for us. So let's go ahead and get a list of our open issues. Go ahead and run that and then log into GitHub. And there we go. So now we have our open issue. I'm going to go ahead and grab this issue ID and let's open it up in a new window so it's side by side real quick. And now if I come down to the add comment mutation and I use that subject ID, I say hello world, and I go ahead and run this, it'll pop up over here. But before I do that, I want to go ahead and actually subscribe to incoming comment events. So inside of our live subscription, let's go ahead and subscribe to sgrove blog. And now let's go ahead and run our subscription or our mutation. You can see that we got the data back here already, and it popped up here. So it actually comes back faster inside of our auto-generated application than it does inside of the GitHub UI. And once again, all of the code for these components is meant to be just a starting point. So there's no strong opinions around state handling. It's just using bog standard hooks and whatnot, or forms. And so you can really kind of just tweak from here towards the application you want to build, knowing that you're using kind of the best practices. And really, anytime you have a question of, how would I use a fragment? How would I use a query variable? That's already just handled for you with an exact example for your specific use case inside of the generated code. And you can see that if I just remove the optional styling here, that this is just a very, very simple markup. There's really nothing complicated about it. There's no boilerplate to really delete or anything like that. Now that's cool, but I said that I was going to build this 4 or 5 times. And to do that, I'm actually going to just switch this over. And now let's do one for React Query. We'll open that up in a new window as well. And then we'll do one for React Urkel. Same idea. We also support just plain HTML and JavaScript, so you don't have to build with any specific framework. And then we have Vue and Svelte supported as well. So again, even radically different frameworks or different programming paradigms are all supported. And then finally, Svelte. Okay, so I've just arranged all of the different applications that we've just created inside of a more visually appealing way. And so we can see that each one of these, whether it's Vue, React, Urkel, Apollo, plain JavaScript, or even something like Svelte, each of these generates a very high fidelity, real-time application with all of the authentication, best practices, and as minimal code as possible. So you really have an answer for how do I do X and Y? How do I use variables with Urkel in Vue? How do I build a form for a real-time GraphQL subscription in Svelte? It's all just generated in here for you. And you always have an answer about how to go from starting point to your desired application.